Awesome. We are back in the building with another episode of the Dedication to Excellence podcast. I am your host, Eugene Tamampos, alongside my co-host, Dustin Reyna. Now, it has occurred to me, my friend, that we have not recorded an episode in like 2 whole days, which at the rate we were going, it seems like an eternity. So let's hope we still remember how to do this. How you feeling, man?
I'm feeling good, if I'm lagging, it's just stop motion. It's all intentional. So post-production, guys, it's all my fault. But it's going to be a good episode. We have a rock star on the other line. It's going to be fun.
Love it. Yes. So Dustin's feeling great. His internet connection is not. So for those of you listening for the first time, the purpose of this podcast is to not just inspire and motivate, but to give you real actionable steps and operational strategies from high achievers who have done the things we'll be discussing with them. Because once you're excited, folks, guess what? You actually got to go out there and do some shit. So today's guest is a former pastor turned successful entrepreneur, first in the finance space, and then eventually he would go on to found Operation Dichotomy, a movement that started as a way to bring different perspectives together in conversation, which has evolved into an apparel line whose mission is to bridge the gap between you and me by embracing a culture of listening. I know, novel concept, listening to others in today's world. We are definitely going to dissect that and uncover this whole mystery of listening. Paul Kim, I appreciate you doing the work you do, my friend. It is much needed in today's world. Welcome to the Dedication to Excellence podcast.
Man, thank you guys. As I mentioned before, I'm just humbled to be here with you both, but also just listening to the bits and pieces that I heard of your podcast thus far. You guys are making an impact, man. So I'm glad to be a part of it. Thank you.
Of course, brother. We are excited to have you. So you amazing story, and I know it's rooted in your upbringing in the church. So I figured we'd start there. Mm-hmm. Walk us through what your upbringing was like, and how the church has played a role and continues to play a role in your life.
Yeah. So as much as somebody could be quote unquote born into faith, that was kind of my story. My parents were always Christian. They met in the church. My dad, I think he was in ministry since I was in about 4th or 5th grade. So growing up, I PK, I don't know if you heard of what PKs are, pastor's kids. I was the stereotypical pastor's kid. That's all I knew. Mm-hmm. I couldn't tell the difference between a good Asian kid or a Christian kid because, I mean, they were the same thing to me, right? So I was confused all the time. But that being said, I feel like that definitely impacted the way that I grew up. And then if I were to fast forward a little bit, I went to undergrad for pre-med because, well, that's what Asians do, right? You go to undergrad for pre-med or engineering or business or law. Otherwise, you get kicked out of house. So yep, that's what I did.
Facts.
But long story short, I ended up using that period not to go into pre-med, but then I transitioned into ministry myself. I think college was really the part where I began to differentiate what my actual beliefs were from what my parents told me that I should believe. Mm-hmm. And that was significant for me because now my faith wasn't something that my parents put on me. It was, I believe this for myself. And the reason why I live this way is because I choose to, as opposed to if I didn't live this way before, then I get grounded, can't watch TV, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
And then, just fast forward, I went to seminary, served in ministry.
While we're still there in that part of the story, was there a triggering event that kind of forced you to internally look at your belief system, or was it just by nature of being in college in a transformative phase in life that you were thinking about these things?
Definitely the latter. I think right now, I would say I'm pretty self-aware. And back in those days, most college guys aren't very self-aware in general. I probably was more like that. But what ended up happening was just gradually the things that I began to have kind of implanted in me by my parents and the way that I grew up, they began to get tested little bit by little bit. And like you said, because you're in college, now you have the freedom of choice to do what you want without getting in trouble, without anybody knowing what's going on. It's all on you. And so I feel like that's really what it was. Gradual things, step by step. I began to test them. And basically decide whether or not this is something that I believed in or not.
And then you made the decision that it reinforced your beliefs, this self-awareness journey.
Yeah, I would say it reinforced, but then also it also clarified a lot. I think there's a point where you think you know what you believe, but until it's tested, until the questions are raised, and until you learn to apply those things in your life, you really don't know. And I feel like that's really what happened is I had this underlying blueprint of what I was supposed to believe. But then as I began to take these steps and actually live out my life, it just clarified for me. And it's still being clarified for me.
Can you think of anything specific that you had grown up believing, and then when college came around, you said to yourself, oh, this really is what I believe now that I'm doing my own analysis here?
Oh, man, there's so much. I think one age-old question is, is God really good if there's evil in this world? And shoot, we could be here all night talk about this one, but
this is what we're here for, brother.
It's I'm trying to condense it in my head just a little bit because I don't want too much of my theology education to
hey, freestyle, bro. The mic is yours, man.
Basically, the question I feel like has always existed because you look at the condition of the world, you look at the people that exist in it, you look at natural disasters, you look at freaking travesties like child trafficking, human trafficking.
Sure.
And then you hear about these things happening, and then you have to question, the Bible says God is good. Can he really be good if all this crap still exists in our world? It's almost like the default is, well, either God is not good and that's why this crap happens, or God is not really in as much control as we think or we say that he's supposed to be, because he is good, but yet this stuff is happening. But I realized that more and more as I began to explore these dichotomies, and this is where it all started, right? It started with my faith journey, where I always felt like it has to be one or the other. What I began to find was that I was really putting God in this box and faith in this box that I really wanted to understand. And in a sense, it's human nature, right? You want to understand what you believe. You want to understand everything. Like, I feel like it's hard to believe anything if I don't comprehend it completely. But I feel like when you talk about God, right? And if we're even thinking about a supernatural higher power outside of the Christian faith, like, this is a being who's supposed to be above everything. Christians say that, hey, you worship this God because he is beyond everything. He created everything. He created people. He's powerful, et cetera, et cetera. How is it possible then that you would expect to understand fully this guy that you expect to worship? Because if you understand him, why the heck would you worship him, right? It's just like me and you. And so a lot of my journey was like wrestling with these things and realizing and understanding that, hey, maybe it's not as clear as black and white. It's just a matter of exploring these two different truths that seem to contradict, but the reality is they overlap a lot. And so, the whole God is good, is he good? That was a question, but I guess now that I'm beginning to answer this question, it was that process for a lot of my beliefs that kind of led me to this place of like, shoot, man, I think I know God and I think I know what the Bible says. But at the same time, if God is God, then maybe there's just so much I will never grasp till the day I die and see him face to face. So
that's deep.
Long answer to your question.
Bro, we didn't bring a pastor on this show to not preach. So I'm going to need some more of this. So that's the foundation you've built for yourself. While, man, you were having some deep thoughts in college. I was not thinking like this when I was in college. So you're asking yourself these deeper questions about life. And then that's when you decided that the path of ministry was for you. And so walk us through how you made that decision and what you had initially intended to set out to do when you did.
Yeah, so I joked before about being in pre-med because that's the Asian thing that we have to do, which is still true.
It is.
But my parents were a little bit different. I think because they were in ministry, they actually wanted me to get into ministry as well, which for me was like, no, like, I see how you guys live. And I mean, by no means am I bashing, pastors or ministers in any way, but it's not an easy life. it's stressful. You have to bear the burdens of other people, and it's an honorable thing. But at the same time, I don't know if I'm built for that, nor do I know if I want to do that. And I sure as hell I'm not going to do it just because you tell me to do it. And undergrad was kind of like this battle of going back and forth between, do I pursue this route of medicine because it pays well, it's a noble career, you help people, and then potentially you can use the skills that you've acquired through med school to go abroad and to help people. And I had this idealistic imagery, I guess, of how I could help people and kind of do ministry and implement my faith in all these different ways. But the reality was I didn't know anything besides the pre-med path that I thought I wanted or ministry. So even from the beginning, it was like one or the other. I don't know how old you guys are, but I'm 35. And so I grew up in the age where YouTube and all that stuff wasn't really prominent. And so like these days, man, like you hop on anything, any YouTube, TikTok, whatever, and the possibilities are endless.
Right.
But back in those days, it's just like, well, I know my dad, he's a pastor, and I know that doctors make a lot of money, and I know engineers are super nerdy. I'm not really like that. So it's gotta be one of these two things.
Sure.
That's all I knew. And so basically at the end of my undergrad, I made a decision where I hated what I was doing in pre-med. I hated waking up every morning to go do research in a medical lab, which is not really related to medicine, but in my mind at that time, that's what pre-med was. So I hated it. I remember literally waking up one morning, but man, I do not want to go to work. I go to work, do this pipetting crap 100,000 times a day. There's nobody else in the office, just me, bored as hell, and I don't want to do this. And
Sounds
so,
terrible.
yeah, right. And I was like, man, it must mean that I'm supposed to go into ministry. And so that's what I did. I think the one thing that really broke it down for me at that point and clarified that this was what I wanted to do was this idea of wanting to make the greatest impact possible. And for me, what's more impactful than the impact that you're going to make into eternity, right? Into the afterlife. It's like, oh, so I should become a pastor because that's the only way you can have that kind of impact, which is totally untrue, but I was ignorant. And so that's how I ended up choosing that path. And then I ended up in seminary up in Boston, studying church ministry. And that was 8 years of my life, man.
What's that journey like? Most people will never traverse that journey of being in ministry. I mean, what was your experience like? I'm sure you're in a position of influence within a congregation, and people come to you with their problems, and you're probably helping people through some pretty deep stuff. Like, how did you enjoy that?
Oh, man, that's a leading question if I ever heard one. But it's well, the studying process is kind of like grad school. It is grad school. So I did the studying part for 4 years. I'll speak to my personal experience in ministry just because depending on where you end up, what kind of church you go to, what kind of culture you're a part of, it's just so different. But for me, I'm Korean American. So I ended up in a Korean American church. And generally, quote unquote, Korean American churches, what happens is the older adult congregation they're Korean speaking. So they immigrated here from Korea. So that's kind of not where I was a part of. I started in youth ministry. So with kids from 6th through 12th grade, and they were the kids of these immigrant Koreans. And so like, that's how I grew up, right? So I feel like I related to these kids very well. And in some ways, youth ministry was like babysitting, but in many other ways, it's like you being a big brother to these kids and being a mentor to them. But thinking back, I started when I was 23, and I was in youth ministry for 4 years until about 26, 27. And like, I think of myself as a 23-year-old, and I wonder why they hired me. Like, to be honest, like I wouldn't have hired myself. And sometimes I wonder what kind of damage I did to these kids without not knowing it. But at the end of the day, it's let's love the kids as much as possible. Let's teach them as much as we can correctly. let's not try to screw with their beliefs and be too heretical.
Mhm.
But it was fun. I think it was fun. I was single at the time. Had a lot of time, played a lot of ball with the kids. It was literally like, we call it ministry, but it was just being a big brother to this big group of kids.
Sure.
That part was cool. About 4 years later, same church. What ended up happening was, well, one, a lot of these kids got older, they graduated, they went to college. And then during breaks, they would come back and there was no place for them because they've aged out of youth group at this time.
Mm.
At the same time, we were in a town called Waltham, Massachusetts, which is, obviously it's an English speaking area because we are in the United States. But we didn't have a ministry for English speaking people that were adults because we had Korean speakers, the adults, and then we had the English speaking kids.
Got it.
And so like a 25-year-old comes to church for the first time, they'd be sitting in service with a sixth grader. Obviously the content is going to be different. It's just going to be a weird mix. So my senior pastor said, hey, we need to start an English ministry. Okay, sounds good. It sounds like we have a need. What's your plan? And he looks at me and he's like, you're going to do it. I'm like,
Wow.
What the hell are you talking about? Like, I'm 27. These are going to be like anywhere from 18 to the oldest member in that congregation when we started was about 70 years old. And so, I mean, let's be honest, what's a 27-year-old going to teach or do for a 70-year-old who've already lived their life and they know a lot more than I do, right?
Sure.
But that was, if I were to pinpoint where my entrepreneurship journey began, it would have been that moment where you have nobody to start with. We have no real English speaking people that are part of our church. You got to go find some and you got to start this ministry.
Mm-hmm.
So
you're saying there's a lot of parallels between a business journey and building a ministry?
Yeah, there can be, depending on how you approach ministry and depending on what stage you get into it at.
So how did you approach it?
Well, I had to approach it from starting from zero because that's what it was. We had literally one college kid who was going to be a part of the ministry. And then I had to go basically poach these other two deacons from another church. But it was because he used to go to our church. It wasn't as bad as I made it just sound. but I had to convince them to join our team. It really was kind of like business now that we're talking about it. I had to bring him over. He's going to be our two deacons, pretty much. We're not going to pay you anything. In fact, you're going to be serving everyone in the church. But hey, join me as we do this ministry. It was
pitch your vision.
Yeah, that's really all it is, right? Same exact thing. Pitch your vision, sell the dream, and sell the big things that you're going to do and then execute. I'm not sure I was the best at executing, but I tried.
For sure, man. So how did that grow? And then what eventually led you out of the church?
It grew slowly. I think I always focus a lot on building those one-on-one, really close relationships. So if we think of it that way, we started with like that one guy, plus the two deacons that I brought over. So that's four of us. By the end, 3.5, 4 years later, we had about 20, 25 people maybe. But for me, it was more about the relationships that were built and the one-on-one connections that I still have with a lot of these people. So that's how it grew. Numbers wise, relationship wise, I'll leave it at that. That's how it grew. The transition out of ministry is a whole different story. But basically, I had been dating my now wife for 4 years. 4 years. I left ministry in 2016. We started dating in late 2011. So we've been dating for about 4 years, long distance. I was in Boston. She was in Virginia in med school. And man, I don't know if you guys ever been in a long distance relationship where you guys see each other maybe once every 1 month to 3 months, but it's tough, man. And basically by the end of that 4-year period, she tried to get into residency in Boston where I was, which I definitely thought was going to happen. But it didn't happen. She ended up in Albany, New York, which is about 2.5, 3 hours away from where I was. And then came the ultimatum. Say, hey, we've been doing this long distance thing for too damn long. Either one of us has to move or we're going to end it because it's too hard. And the reason why I say it's an ultimatum is because she clearly cannot move because her residency was assigned to her. Sure. So it's basically either I move or we're done. All right, well, I guess I'm going to retire. and I moved to Albany, New York. The reason why that ended up being my transition out of ministry, I didn't know what it's going to be that at the time. But because she was in residency, we knew that she's only going to be there for another 2.5 or 3 years. And because it's Albany, I knew we weren't going to stay there long term. It's not really a place where you're like, hey, dream of living in Albany one day. Pick up all my things. It's not. Have you guys ever been?
No, I have not. But if you're in Albany right now and listening to our show, we still love you.
We do, and you know the truth as much as I do, so don't deny it.
We're not telling you anything you don't know.
For sure. But yeah, so we went there, and my 2.5 years were gone. I don't want to start a full-time ministry position and then just get up and leave.
Right.
Near the end of my time in Boston, I started working part-time with WFG in finance. And that was because I needed to make extra money to pay for my wedding. And it's a whole other story in itself. But basically, I needed to raise money to pay for my wedding, and I needed to find something that will fit my pastor schedule, which is basically being on call 24/7 in case something went busy. And nothing fit except for entrepreneurial stuff because I had to create my own schedule. And so I figured once I moved to Albany, I might as well just continue this finance thing full time in Albany by myself, my team back in Boston. So that was not easy, but that's kind of what led me into my path now.
If I may unpack that a little bit, because I came from a background of network marketing. Now, I know WFG doesn't consider themselves as a network marketing organization, but there's a lot of overlap there, and one could make the argument. Talk us through that experience. How was that like, building that finance company, and what is your opinion of the home business industry that I think very highly of, but I know can catch a bad rap out in society?
Are we talking about WFG in particular, or are we talking about network marketing in particular? Both.
Okay. I mean, just your thoughts on your specific company and then just the industry in general. Because from what I've seen, and just some context on how you and I even became connected here, network marketing is a phenomenal industry. That's where I met Billy Anderson, who's led me to you. You know,
yeah,
it was my very first network marketing event that I went to. Not very first, but the very first one I actually took serious. Billy was the speaker, and he was 22 at the time. And he was on stage and he was delivering his sermon, if you will. I was like, I don't know what this super energetic guy is talking about, but I'm in. And that one decision changed my life, because through that came the personal development, the network. I learned how to sell. I learned how to lead people, all those soft skills that you need to become successful as an entrepreneur. Yeah. So I think very highly of the industry, but I know there's a lot of people who don't. And I've also been affiliated now with WFG for a few months with, MLS's new organization. So I'm there as well. So what has your experience been, and what would you say to anybody thinking about network marketing and WFG specifically?
Let me answer the second one first. What would I say to somebody thinking about it? Depending on who you get connected through to that business, if you trust that person and that's somebody that you look up to, you trust them, so they're good people, just try it out. Like, it's really one of those things where you hear so much about, you hear so much about everything, but for some reason, not for some reason, I know why network marketing can get a bad rep, but you got to see it from the inside. And the reason why I say it that way is because for me personally, I got connected through a friend of mine. His name's Alan Choi. Maybe he'll listen to this someday. So Alan, I like you. I'm about to say good stuff about you, just as a disclaimer. He's a phenomenal guy, and he's always looking out for the best interest of people. His whole family was a part of WFG, and for me, going to meet his family and seeing how they do business, I don't see how they could have done it any better. The way they want to help people, the heart behind the message. Um, there's some people that talk about the opportunity as a very much like they sell the opportunity just because they want somebody to join their team and kind of take advantage of this individual or their network or their skills. But this guy and this whole family is all about providing value first and trusting that as he provides value, whether it's to the products, services, education, or like their parents, Alan's parents, they actually housed me in their basement for 2 months for free while I was transitioning from Boston to Albany. So that's the kind of people they were.
Nice.
So needless to say, my experience was great because of the people that I had, or how I got involved with, through whom I got involved with WFG. There you go. English is my first language, so I should know how to put these sentences together. And then, like, do you believe in the product? Do you believe in the value of whatever they're offering, whether it's insurance or investments? Is it shampoo? Is it the quality shampoo and the nutrition, the supplements that the company says it is? Is it worth? Let's put it this way. Would you sell this stuff to your family, and would you use it yourself? And if it's not, regardless of whether or not you're network marketing or not, you shouldn't be doing that anyways.
Sure.
But that being said, if it is a great product, even if you're not making any money off of it, why wouldn't you recommend it to your friends and your family if you use it and you like it? And so I feel like network marketing, if done correctly and not in an annoying way, it's great. But of course, the problem is most people
do it in an annoying way. Yeah. There you go.
But with network marketing, what would you say is like the evolution? What I tend to see a lot, with Eugene and yourself as well, you move on. It's kind of a stepping stone in the long run. I mean, you may continue off with it and, build it as one of your pillars of income. But I see a lot of people venture out into their own individual entrepreneur journeys, such as Eugene with Viral and several other that he has, as well as yourself. What would you say is like kind of the lifespan of someone entering in there, because they develop themselves personally and then move on? Or
I feel like there's a whole spectrum.
Yeah.
I've known people like myself and Eugene, and usually I feel like for us, I'll just speak for myself. For me, I developed the skills of entrepreneurship, personal development, discipline, all these things through WFG and through network marketing, because technically it is an entrepreneurship space. But for me, as much as I value finance and education, financial security, financial independence, all that stuff, it's not my main passion. It's not what keeps me up at night, to be honest. And I feel like it's those kinds of people that will use this as a driver of income and skills to put it into a different thing. We'll call it a different bucket, I guess. But at the same time, I've seen people who love entrepreneurship itself, and they love the growth and the business just in and of it, regardless of what the product or service is. And a lot of times they'll just stay in network marketing and they'll maximize their time and productivity within it. So I've seen the whole spectrum.
100%. And so it sounds like you built the skills there, and then that was the foundation for Operation Dichotomy, which I'd love to get into now. So how did that transition happen from your career in financial services to doing what you're doing now and the movement you started?
Oh man, there's so many little steps in between.
Condensed 10 years into 20 minutes.
Yeah, I got 20 minutes. Okay. When I was working in finance with WFG and Transamerica, I found Ed Milet. I knew Ed Milet. I found Andy Frisella through Ed Milet, and then I connected to Arte. And once I got involved with Arte, I began to learn a lot about business in general. And then over time, a couple of years later, I met a guy who became a friend of mine, and he actually had an apparel brand that he had no idea what he was doing with in terms of business. He had a great idea, he had a great cause, but business-wise, he just didn't know. I thought, looking back, I didn't know either, but back then I knew more than he did.
Perfect.
that's what happened, right? Like I thought I knew more than he did. I said, hey man, you have this great idea, this great business opportunity. Let me provide the business expertise that I have, and then we'll just become partners in this business. That lasted about 4 or 5 months. The reason being the pace was just a little bit too different, where I just wanted to go hard, pedal to the metal every single day, where for him it was more of a side hustle, kind of a hobby. I don't know what he's going to do with it later down the road, but that's just what it was at the time. But I also want to respect him as the CEO and the founder of this brand because, hey man, this is your thing, right? And if you're not running with it, I can't run ahead and drag you along. If you're the CEO, you got to be dragging me along.
Right.
So long story short, we parted ways with that, but I had gotten a taste of this apparel industry. And what I liked about the apparel industry and the apparel brand in general is that the clothes that you wear and the clothes that you produce, it's not so much about the fashion, it's about the culture that you're trying to create.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that aspect of the apparel side is, hey, let's create a culture and let's let the apparel be the uniform of the culture that we're trying to create. And you get that from Bobby Hundreds. I'll credit him.
What is that culture? What is that culture for you? What are you building? Let's dissect that a little bit. What's your image?
Yeah, well, now that you ask me, so we call it Operation Dichotomy. Dichotomy means that there are two basically things on the separate end of the spectrum that either really exist or they're just the image or illusion of existing, the separation existing. For me, like I mentioned before, growing up in church, I used to think of, let me take a step back. Not all churches are this way. This was just the way that I grew up, where I always thought that everything was black and white. It's right or wrong. It's A or B. There's no in the middle. There's no gray areas. But what I began to realize is as I met more people, as I grew more personally, as I learned a lot about life, there's almost no black and white, right? It's almost all gray when it comes to applying different truths that we believe in. And like, I'll give you a quick example. In church, within my belief system, we'll call it, we generally believe that abortion is quote unquote murdering a child, right? Abortion should not take place because it's a life inside of a woman. And that's just what we believe.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many cases within real world situations where it's not that cut and dry. I'm married to OBGYN, so I hear, man, the things that I hear about when it comes to about pregnant women, about birth complications, about just like things that you wouldn't even imagine. There literally is not a right or wrong answer to that question. Should I abort this baby in this situation? Even if you're super clear, black and white with your beliefs, when you apply it into this specific situation with this specific woman and this child, like it's either one wrong answer or the other wrong answer.
Right.
It's just one of those things. And that's just one example, right? We as a society, if I'm generalizing a little bit, we assume a lot. We assume a lot about people. We have a lot of misconceptions. I mean, I could sit here with you guys, but hey, Eugene, you must be A, B, and C, and D because you're wearing a jersey, you have tattoos, and a beanie on. And
Right.
then Dustin, I see a bookshelf behind you with all these books. You must be the nerdiest freaking guy I've ever met in my life, and blah, 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 blah. But then we actually sit down and have a conversation.
Those actually weren't very far off statements.
Well, let's peel back the layers, right? There's more to it than that, at least. But we don't get to see the real Dustin, or we don't get to see the real Eugene because our initial assumptions just say forget about it. So,
and I think that's kind of bred in the culture, man. I mean, like, nuance has been completely lost amongst the general public, and it is either you are this or you are that. People love making decisions based on headlines, but never take the time to actually read into the article and understand the details.
No, man, absolutely.
Sorry, I wanted to make that observation because I love what you stand for with this. So please just continue to riff, man. Please
Okay.
continue to talk about dichotomy.
Yeah, man, I would love to. Shoot, like especially these days with politics, not to get too political, but man, like when I see, let's talk about church context where they're like, oh, I can't believe you're a Christian and you voted for Trump, or I can't believe you're a Christian and you voted for Biden. Like, how can these two same statements exist within the same belief system, right? And like get outside the church, it's no different. Like, dude, I can't believe you voted for Trump. Don't you know he's blah 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 blah. Like, oh, I can't believe you voted for Biden. Don't you know he's da, 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 da. He stands for all this other crap. And like, I honestly, I've had one conversation out of hundreds where the conversation started. So, oh, that's interesting that you would vote for Trump or you would vote for Biden. Why? Why would you do that? And he was genuinely curious. He's a great friend of mine, but that's why, because he's like that. If we can somehow shift our communication skills to one of our communication process, I guess, to one of listening first, to being a little bit more inquisitive as opposed to, hey, this is why you believe what you said. You're an idiot. I hate you. Goodbye. It's like, Eugene, like, why do you have tattoos? Why do you wear a beanie with a short sleeve jersey? It's like hot and cold at the same time, man. I don't understand. It's like, well, it's fashion, stupid, right? You just tell me whatever. But like,
damn, I just got called out.
I don't understand fashion. I'll be honest.
The fact, just for the record, the reason why is because my hair is very long right now. And that's why. And yeah, nothing to do with the way it looks and everything to do with me hiding my hair.
Well, there you go, right? I never would have known that if we never had that conversation.
You would have just assumed I have terrible fashion taste. That makes total sense.
I would have said good fashion taste, but what do I know?
Like we interviewed Miguel a while back. You look at him, you know, first view, if you see him on any street side, you'd be like, oh, look at this cholo looking guy. You know, I can see tattoos on his, you know, if he's not wearing a long sleeve, which most of the time he does. Completely tatted up, but you wouldn't think like, okay, he's got his own plane, he's got like 50 plus franchise, real estate business, all this stuff, you know, it's just generalizing. Would you say that just the constant stroking of emotion over the past decade, especially with technological advancements and just a lot like conditioning, I think this generation and the Gen Z generation into being very much reactive would be
reactive.
A very let's say catalyst to what we're seeing today in the emotional response to just any opposition to what their standing is in things.
Yes. I think our culture has been almost bred this way. It's been dare I say, manipulated to be this way.
Conditioned.
I would add that social media, the echo chambers that it creates because of the algorithms. Are natural. I mean, human beings naturally don't like conflict. And they don't like that discomfort. They like being around people that think the same, speak the same, and kind of just encourage stagnancy almost, right? Like, hey, you're good just the way you are. I think the same way as you, and I'll never challenge you. Let's hang out and have a beer together. That's our life. Yeah. And like we do that in our real life circles. We do that through social media. It's just constant echo chambers feeding each other the same perspective. And over time, when that's all you hear, and then you get this one blip of like this guy who speaks something differently, all of a sudden, like your response is like, you're an idiot, man. I've met millions of people who thought this way, and all of a sudden you're saying something different. Something's wrong with you. And it's a combination of a lot of things, in my opinion.
One thing I have noticed is a lot of times, not a lot of times, like 99.99% of the times, is you've got to look at your focus group. Is generally a lot of these people, you know, they've, like we've said, been conditioned, is they're basing that off of such a small group of people, but they're so aggressively and just completely wholeheartedly in that, you know, when you try and broaden their perspective a little bit, they're, you know, outside of their family, outside of their localized group, into thinking, there are millions and billions of other people. If you look at the wider spectrum, there's a much brighter picture. I'm losing my train of thought here, but like that's what I tend to see is they're so conditioned into their small group, they're just not venturing out. It's the same thing I kind of see within the United States is we're not venturing out. We're very desensitized to the rest of the world or even any other cultures or other people's opinions or anything else. And that's just getting a little political.
Is we focus on the anecdotes as opposed to the data because most people are emotionally reactive as opposed to logical in their thinking, which leads me to my question for you, Paul. What personally safeguards have you put in place to make sure you're remaining self-aware? Because what I see a lot of times is when a good message is put out there, the person listening to it who probably that message should apply to them say, yeah, everyone else, you guys should listen more, when in reality they're probably the ones who need to listen more. So how do you make sure that you're aware of not letting that bias cloud your judgment, and what is your advice to anybody to not be emotionally reactive and more logical and think more clearly?
My greatest how do you say this? My greatest gut check? No. How do you say this? Basically, my my guiding light is my wife. And the reason why I say that is because that quote unquote stereotype that women are more passive aggressive. She's not, right? She is the opposite of, if I say something stupid or do anything borderline hypocritical, like I'll hear it and I'll hear it and I'll hear it and I'll hear it. And it won't be in a nice way. It'll be in a very much, you're telling people to listen, but you're sitting here going off and not listening. So that being said, I feel like, well, let me add this factor. Over the course of the past 5-10 years, somehow I've been able to kind of create this network of a lot of different people, different types of people. And I realize this because I look at my social media feed, especially during the election time. I see everything from like super, 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 super pro Trump. Everything on the left is crazy, communist, fascist, whatever, to the other side of like Trump is the Antichrist, Biden is the savior, blah 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 blah. Like I see everything, and it's funny because I consider myself a little bit more moderate politically, and so I'll kind of get not offended, but I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that one. And then I look at the other side, like, oh, I don't know about that one. But because there's such a different spectrum of people and thinking, I feel like I'm challenged by that to think about things that I normally wouldn't think about. And my wife kind of falls into that group as well. She's somebody that challenges me to get outside my comfort zone and really just question myself. Is this actually how things are? Is this actually true or is it not true? And so the advice that I would give to people is you got to find these people, right? If you're surrounded by the same types of people all the time that think exactly the same way and you're never challenged in your thinking, then you're probably stuck in a bubble. It might be a cool bubble to be a part of, but you got to be aware of what's going on outside that bubble to realize what our society actually looks like. And I feel like a lot of times we have to be active about it, because if we default to our natural tendencies, it's going to be just people that are like-minded all the time.
So what initiatives is Operation Dichotomy taking to rectify this, man? Like to bring this level of awareness to the greater society?
Man, if I had this answer down, our world would be much better place already.
So how is Paul Kim going to fix the world?
Let me tell you.
There we go.
Well, like, I think the biggest thing that we need to do as society is just listen, right? And we have a shirt that literally says "I'm listening" on it, and
I love it.
We just don't listen enough, right? We speak to be heard, and I would argue that a lot of times we listen in order to interject our thoughts, not actually listen to where the other person is coming from. And that's a problem. And that starts with our family, our our neighborhood, our neighbors, our cousins. I think it's funny that what do they say at Thanksgiving? The two things or three things you can't talk about is two things: religion and politics. Can't touch that.
Right.
Yeah.
And like, I kind of get it, but if you can't learn to navigate these topics with your closest people, then how the heck are you going to do that with people that you don't give a crap about? And of course, you're not going to like them. And so, in one hand, it's like, man, it's ironic that that's how it's become. Where, Dustin, you said that our society is mostly complacent. Like, that's an example of it right there. Let's avoid conflict as much as possible instead of learning to navigate through it and become better people in the process. So going back to your question, Eugene, I think we just promote listening a lot. We talk about listening over and over and over again. Our apparel is taking a little bit of a turn. We always wanted to create conversation pieces because one of the best ways to listen is to have something to talk about and to hear somebody's opinion. If we can create apparel that makes me ask a question, like, hey, Eugene, like, what's that on your shirt, man? What's that stand for? What does it mean? What is dichotomy? What? And then just have a conversation. These are little conversations that we have over and over and over again with different people. That's going to be what changes the big picture. And I feel like if I were to leave just one thing for people to think about as they want to change society as a whole, rarely is it that one big grand gesture that changes the world. It's the little things over and over and over and over and over again. Exactly. It's like everything else. It's not one day of working out for 8 hours. Like, that's just going to kill you, right? It's the constant, consistent, small workouts, daily good diet. That's going to be what changes things. It's the same thing with changing the world, man. Like, you got to have a conversation with the person to your left and to your right, get to know them, listen to them, and to have them do the same thing over and over and over again. That's all it is.
So moral of the story, ball pie shirts or buy Paul shirts. Mess that up. We're going to edit that. Hey, Paul, we're coming up on time here, but we like to end every episode in the same fashion. And I think that last topic was perfect to kind of bring it down the home stretch. Dustin always has some rapid fire questions that I make him have, whether he has them or not. So maybe knock out a few of those. And then we have our final question that we're bringing home with. So Dustin, throwing you on the spot as I do every episode, brother. Go get him.
I had a topic of interest that I kind of wanted to go into, though, as well as self-improvement and how you were talking about listening and a lot of the topics that we hear, especially with a lot of our prior guests. One commonality between them generally is a place of faith and looking up. Is the Bible being one of the best business books out there? It's just kind of regurgitating every other book that comes out there, is almost regurgitating the same things said. How have you applied all of that into your business, with personal development as well as your experience being a pastor, and how has that led you to the success that you've seen so far? Like, what elements of your faith have you been steadfast at that have helped you grow along the way?
I actually had a conversation with Vaughn Kohler today. I had him on a podcast or something else.
Nice.
And he's the spiritual discipline guy, like, he's all about spirit and then work, spirit and excellence. And we're talking about, like, literally the Bible talks about discipline all the time.
Oh yeah.
And you see Jesus get up at 3 a.m. or 5 a.m. or whatever. He stays up all night in prayer by himself in the mountain because he needs that time to meditate. He needs that time to just clear his head and, like, refocus on the mission that needs to be done. Like, that's one of the main things that I've tried to implement into my life, into my day. Dustin, having a kid, there's no such thing as a routine anymore. It's you sleep when you can, you do what you got to do when you can, period. But, like, it's the discipline you learn from the heroes of the faith that I try to implement into my personal life. I would say that a lot of the biblical principles focus on this idea of loving the other person and putting them above yourself, which really just means treating them better than you would treat yourself, right? And in entrepreneurship, a lot of it is networking. A lot of it is meeting people. It's dealing with people, whether it's your customers, your coworkers, your employees. Once you learn to treat these people with respect and put them on a pedestal, even above yourself, that relationship is going to go places where it wouldn't if you're just trying to extract from them as much as you can in selfishness. And I feel like in the long term, once you're able to build these relationships selflessly as much as possible, that's going to be what carries you to success. And everything else, all that stuff, but team who cares about you and knows that you care about them. I mean, your business, your family, your life's not going to go anywhere. So that's the biggest thing I would say.
I love it.
Damn, like low key, I kind of want to end it there, but we have one more question, bro, because it's what we do. That was a good response. So you're gonna have to top that right now. Just fair warning.
Oh man.
So, Paul, being the Dedication to Excellence podcast, we like to end every episode by asking, in your own words, what does it mean to live a life in dedication to excellence?
It means tomorrow you gotta be better than today. It means that the next 24 hours of your life, you shouldn't be in the same step or the same situation that you are in the day before. Sometimes that means going a step backwards to make a few steps forwards, or even just to learn a lesson or two. But at the end of the day, if we all have 24 hours a day, right? We've seen these memes over and over and over again. But if you're not using those same 24 hours to move forward and to become better at whatever it is that you're trying to be better at, then you're being stagnant. So dedication to excellence means tomorrow you're better than today. Today you're better than yesterday. Just keep pushing forward.
Preach. Wise words from the pastor. We'll go ahead and leave it there. Well, Paul, Kim, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I like this episode, man. I feel like we took it in some directions that we hadn't before. So I think from now on, moving forward, we're going to have some more of these bigger life question conversations. I find these quite entertaining. Paul, where can the people find you and follow your journey and support?
I am at Who is Paul Kim on Instagram. Paul Kim is probably the easiest but most common Korean name. So I had to add the Who is Paul Kim. And then for Operation Dichotomy, we're just at Operation Dichotomy, operationdichotomy.com. But Instagram is where we hang out the most.
I love it.
Awesome. Fantastic. So make sure you give Paul a follow. Make sure you go buy his apparel. Make sure you listen more. Take these steps that he gave and these tips and go out there and apply them and reach out to that person to your left, to your right, and be that change on the micro level that you want to see on the macro level. But on behalf of my co-hosts, Dustin and I, we are the Dedication to Excellence podcast. Appreciate everybody who's been listening in, showing love, continue to leave reviews, tell friends. We are on a tear right now. We are on the verge of hitting the new and noteworthy list, which will open up our audience to millions of eyes. So appreciate the support, guys. Stay tuned. We're definitely going to deliver more heat moving forward. But until next time, y'all stay blessed. Y'all take care of yourselves. We will holler at you on the next one. Peace.